in agriculture. So these challenges, climate change, COVID-19, wars that impact how we access, for example, the Russia-Ukraine crisis really impacted how African farmers access fertilizers, and how, because some of this, the trade ecosystem that had been developed was disrupted. That impacts how we invest in things. When debt goes up and up, when the world, what is it called, this exchange rate ecosystem that impact how money is accessed, it impacts how Africa accesses resources and what Africa is able to do. So I think the biggest challenge is not being able to have the resources that was intended. And I say this very intentionally. In 2003, our heads of state made this declaration with a clear intention to make a difference in the sector. I want to assume that the only reason we haven't done this is because of resource challenges. Are we in a better position today? We have even more challenges today. Because, again, all that has happened means that on average we are paying more than 20% of our GDP to deal with debt. On average, we lost so much money because of COVID. We lost so much money because of climate. We are losing so much money because of climate change. So the good news now, I guess the good news of what we are doing today here is trying to incorporate these challenges into the next generation of Caadp, recognizing that we need to refocus the challenges we had in 2003 when we did the first generation. We need to think and refocus our attention, but also understand sectors, what are the sectors that present opportunities and what are the sectors that need doubling down and areas that need doubling down for us to be able to do more. And I'm really proud of what the African Union has done in getting this Caadp here today secured, because it has shown urgency. The Union has shown urgency in getting this work done, but it also has incorporated some of the critical elements that we are hoping to see, some in the sectors that are critical to the sector. So, for example, incorporating the whole food systems agenda, recognizing that nutrition, recognizing that hunger numbers are increasing, but also recognizing that how we use the environment is very critical to sustainability of the agricultural system itself. So many of these things are being incorporated, and it's really, really critical as we wind down this Caadp, and as governments take up this Caadp agenda, these are things that I feel will give us better opportunities to implement it. Long answer, I hope, but I hope it covers some of the things you're looking for.
Thank you. The second is, this summit is very key in advancing agricultural development on the continent. Can you just share with us Agra's support, which has translated into tangible impacts for the African farmers?
Agra has, Agra, first of all, is an institution that works across 15 countries on the African continent. Our ambition is to work to support the agricultural sector across the continent, and it's not about being physically present in a country, as it is ensuring that every country has what it needs to define its own development agenda. So in the countries where we are at, we use it as an opportunity to define what the development agenda looks like. We have coined the word transferable assets as a way of thinking about what products do we develop that then can be used from country to country, whether we are present or not present, and then be part of transforming the development of that country. Let me give you an example of seed systems, for example. To move the agricultural sector forward in a tangible way, in a productive way, ensure labor productivity meaning what the farmer gets for the labor he puts in, right? You have to have enough yield per hectare. You have any unit you plant, you want to have high yields, where you get, instead of getting 1 ton, you want to get 8 metric tons for nearly the same energy. So that's what using improved technology is about. What system then delivers that? It's not the technology alone. What system delivers that? What Agra has done is to create the system and the ecosystem that delivers seeds to farmers across the countries we are working in. But we also have a model and an institution called CESA, Center of Excellence for for seed transformation in Africa, which then can accompany. So if a country came to Agra and said, we want to expand we want to do something about our seed system, I promise you in 3 years, we can help them get a seed system up and running because we do have the technology and the capability to do that. So that's number one. Number two is thinking about why has it been so difficult to transform the African farmer? Right? What is holding us back? One of the things we figured out, not that it is rocket science, but actually it's been here and keeps being here forever, is the ecosystem around the farmer. We've always come at this smallholder farmer problem from a perspective of being very solution-oriented in the sense that we provide a solution. And the solution is based at what we do well, not what the farmer wants. We've figured out to focus on what the farmer wants and what the farmer needs to transform his livelihood. The farmer needs seeds, but he also needs fertilizers, but he also needs a market, but he also needs water, but he also needs ABCD, needs financial inclusion and all that. How do you create an ecosystem of service that helps business work with the farmer? Because they have visibility of who the farmer is, because they have means of reaching the farmer, because they can engage with the farming community. So we've, in nearly now, last strategy 7 countries, but now in near every country working now, I think now 12 countries, we've established that geographical base, what we are calling landscape-based transformation for farmers, where we encourage businesses to come in with us. Agra doesn't have the resources to transform a country. Agra doesn't have the resources to move smallholder farmers out of poverty. Neither do the people that fund us, they don't. But we do have enough resources to create the models that can help countries do that, right? So this consortium model allows private sector to come in as a player at any scale and in different places based on what the needs are, and be able to do their part. And as Agra, we keep looking for the weakest link. 2 things that we've identified as some of the biggest weakest links: extension. So we come in and we pay for extension and make sure that extension is working. And then farmer organization, to just ensure that farmers are organized and visible. But also maybe just to add this, markets. Markets is always a challenge, and ensuring that farmers are linked to markets in a good way is something that we are doing as well. So there's no one single problem, but we believe that by creating these tangible assets that can be moved on from country to country, then Africa and Caadp, the Caadp agenda can be moved forward. We've also been part of tracking the biannual review. And the biannual review tracking, which tracks Caadp, is really about these things. Do farmers have access to inputs? Do farmers have access to markets? Are the farmers transforming their livelihoods? And again, you can't track what is not being invested in. So when you translate it backwards, it's everyday business that's happening at the farmer level and making sure that that everyday business is happening. So Agra's contribution really has been about creating those models, ensuring that technology is available at the business, micro-business level, business and micro-business level, so that it can go to farmers, but also that it is available to government as a model that can be scaled to millions of farmers. If Agra is working with 300,000 farmers, governments can easily scale that to 5 million farmers. So that's how we see ourselves supporting Caadp. But also then we've started another program, which I'm extremely proud of, at the Africa Food Systems Forum. The Africa Food Systems Forum, which used to be the AGRF, is a forum that we have built to bring public sector and private sector together, because these parts of the agriculture sector sometimes just don't talk enough. So bringing them together, we've now come up with what we are calling legacy program by country, which is where we help the country work on a development program, but we also help them mobilize resources for that development program. And we also assure the partners that have put in money that there's a tracking mechanism that helps us report back. So this will feed directly into the development agenda of the Caadp agenda. So it's something that we feel like will bring in new energy.
Maybe looking at some of the issues you've mentioned, how can we then ensure that the benefits of agricultural development are shared equitably among all Africans, including the smallholder farmers?
I guess sharing equitably, sharing the output of the agriculture sector equitably has to be a business in itself. Have you ever thought of it? If you're doing farming as a business, and many of us educated people do farming as a business when some of the other things are not working, right? We all have, in Kenya we call it side hustle, right? so people have these side hustles that they go and do. If you're not getting a profit, how many times will you do it? So if none at all, you're shaking your head. So if you look at how value chains are built in the agricultural ecosystem, the businesses that have done well are the businesses that have figured out how to make a value chain work for every player in the value chain. Because if I'm not profitable, I'll be the weakest link. So today, most of our value chains are weak because the weakest link is the farmer. If I'm in the business and I'm not profitable, I'm not going to do what is expected, right? So I think the biggest opportunity we have is to strengthen these value chains so that everybody sees that profit is sharing profit in the value chain is a business in itself, because that's how you sustain your business. So it's a business incentive. You will find, for example, in some of the more sophisticated value chains, value is shared, and farmers get good value for what they are doing, and even quality is incentivized and is paid for. So the more we do stuff like that, the more these value chains become sustainable, and the more profitable it is for the businesses that participate in them.
And maybe just finally from me, as your tenure at Agra comes to an end, what are some of the areas you feel need to be prioritized for the sector to move forward?
There are a number of things that need to be prioritized for the sector to move on. I think one of the biggest things that needs to be prioritized is rethink our prioritization. And I mean that. Rethink our prioritization means that when you have 65 to 70% of your people living in a sector, isn't that the sector that should receive the biggest investment? Because you see, you might go and invest in, I don't know, in oil, and I don't know, wherever, I don't know. But if, let's say you go and you say, let's agree that we've decided that the investment case is restaurants, right? Because restaurants makes money or whatever. I went to New York, I found that for every 100 meters there was a restaurant. So I come back here as an African, I say I'm going to put a restaurant for every 100 meters because I saw that in New York there was a restaurant for every, and we're making big money. The question for me would be, or even a movie theaters. I saw so many of them. Who is going to go there? Who is going to go in that restaurant? Because 65% of your population, for every 10 people, 7 people cannot use the facility you just put in there. So it means that developing the rest of our economies, developing the service economy, cannot work as well as we would like it to do, because who is going to use the service? Who is going to use the service you're putting on the table? So having missed that, for me, is the biggest problem. Missing that the agriculture sector is an entry point to how the service economy gets to work, because that's how you get more people into spending money. We've missed that. So as a result, whatever you put out there, you build houses, nobody rents them. You build everything. It doesn't work. Why? Because the service, because people are stuck in poverty. So the way you get people get out of poverty is the agriculture sector. So this Caadp is the entry point. There was something called the agricultural revolution. But the problem is that is near 100 years ago. How come the rest of the world did that? And we think in Africa we will not do that. The agricultural revolution was to get massive amounts of people out of the agriculture, out of low productive economies into higher productive economies. and leave the agricultural sector to a few that are able to manage it from a technology perspective. We need to shift labor from non-productive to more productive sectors. We need to shift labor from places where people have no access to money to places where they have access to money, so that they can be able to spend money in other areas. So, in a nutshell, prioritization needs to be about the agriculture sector so that we get more people out of poverty and get more spending capital and get more sectors to work. And that's how people boost economies. And pay taxes. Farmers, we don't need taxes from farmers, we need taxes from businesses. We don't, if a farmer is a big business, viable business, they have to pay tax. But if a farmer is struggling to produce food, what tax are we talking about? But if we get them out of poverty, they can pay tax, right? So I think that's just being able to look at these things from that perspective and understanding that we need people to pay tax to service our economies, but we can't pay tax if we are poor. Yes. I'm not saying, by the way, I'm not reshaping the policy here. I'm just responding to questions.
Well, thank you.
You wait. We'll take Bryson's question first, then come to you. Please remember to tell us your name and your media outlet. Because his hand was up first. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Byron Adonis Mtingwend. I'm the editor of Spiked Online Media from Zimbabwe. President, you kind of read my mind. I wanted to ask you what has been the impact of Agra's flagship program, which is now called the Africa Food Systems Forum.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
I can go?
So let me just take that one first. The Africa Food Systems Forum was, like I said earlier, was created to create a platform for public and private dialogue. It was also created to create a platform for showcasing progress and learning, but now it has also become a place for knowledge exchange, for scientific knowledge exchange, but also for policy dialogues and discussions. It's grown immensely from just public-private dialogue around why aren't we making the progress we want, to these are the opportunities as well. But also we are using it now as a mechanism to move agendas forward. So really the initial intention was to find ways of fast-tracking the ease of doing business for businesses, because businesses had access to public and they were able to dialogue with public partners, especially ministers and directors. They were able to dialogue around how their businesses are not working, while at the same time receiving feedback around where ministers and governments want to see the most investments. So together, bond that relationship around developing a country between public and private sector. We've taken it further. We've brought in scientists, we've brought in funding institutions, we've brought in farmers' organizations, we've brought in youth, we've brought in parliamentarians, we've brought in agendas for advancing women. And the idea is, we focus a lot on showcasing what is working so that we give people an opportunity to come and learn, but also to take it forward. We focus a lot on networking and creating a networking space, because what we are short of is not lack of ideas. There are so many ideas, but how we network them and advance them together and make them work on the ground sometimes doesn't add up. So it's really a place, a marketplace for the food system sector, for people to come together and exchange ideas. But we also leave, each time we leave the forum with critical agreements on what progress we want to see the next year. Most of those are around things like the legacy program that I just said, where the government comes in with an agenda and is able to advance its agenda and has partners that are willing to contribute to that, to invest in that, both in public and private. We've created day rooms where we are allowing private sector to look at opportunities that are available across the continent. We actually now have investment flows. Uganda itself was able to get 100 million from the D room last year in Tanzania. Tanzania has been able to mobilize 600 million from partners by presenting its flagship or its legacy program to partners at the Africa Food Systems Forum. And if I said the number of young people who you meet in the corridor and they tell you, thank you for introducing us to the D room, I was able to get 200,000, I was able to get this and that. But also the number of partners that are beginning to understand how Africa works because they come to this forum, that are beginning to understand the complexity, but also the fact that it can be simplified when they start working with people. So many stuff that is happening. And what I find exciting is that ministers come and they go back wanting, I really want to have this thing happening in my country because I want to make sure that I'm understanding how to connect people better. And how to connect better with the private sector.
We'll take one more question and then wrap up.
Thank you so much. My name is Vincent Siriko. I work with Radio 1. Mine is about statistics that were cited of the African Development Bank that showed that Africa spends, in totality, we spend about $100 billion in purchase of food supplies from across the continent, from other continents. And if I go by our GDP as a continent, that is about 3.1 trillion thereabout. That's an average of about 3.3%. I'm asking you as organizations that are aiding governments across the continent to see that we are food secure. This 100 billion, that is almost, I'm saying 3.3%, moving forward in the next Caadp, have you thought of interventions where we can harness this money? It remains on the continent for workable solutions. If we are pursuing maybe purchase of food elsewhere, that food is purchased locally across the continent where it may be, so that we retain this. And finally, because that would be an injection in terms of financing to the continent and making things work. Finally, there is a disaster or an emergency response food basket of sort for the continent, like we have the World Food Program or what. Have we looked over at domesticating Africa's, to be maybe Africa Food something program that we have silos and something like that, storage food facilities for an intervention of that kind? Have you thought of it? And what would be your take?
So the first question around the 100 billion is a very critical question because I always say that that's how we export our jobs. Really, very simply, every time I think about 100 billion, I just think about how many jobs we could have made doing that. The opportunity lies in three places. Probably the biggest, and I think again here our leaders had the foresight to think about it, the Africa Free Continental Trade Area, and how we connect our markets, right? But our markets are not going to be connected in space, right? Just by saying the Africa Free Continental Trade Area and the good intentions and signing it off will not make it happen. We have to be connected, physically connected as well, to move stuff. The infrastructure connectivity of the African continent is extremely important, both between countries and within country. One of the reasons we are sending 100 billion out is because it's easier to get food from Brazil than it is to get it from your village, about 200 kilometers from your city. That's a simple problem. The cost of getting 1 ton of maize from Brazil to Dar es Salaam or to Mombasa is $6 a ton. $6 a ton. The cost of getting it from your village, 200 kilometers from Kampala, is going to be what, $6 a ton? Let's be honest. So you know what it is. It's going to be probably $100 a ton. So that's the challenge. So getting it from Mombasa to Kampala is going to be $200 a ton, right? But then even that is more competitive than getting it from some other village somewhere, 300 kilometers from Kampala, than from Mombasa. So infrastructure is the bottom line. infrastructure, connectivity, competitiveness and connectivity. And then the others is looking at comparative and competitive advantage. We have areas, good areas of producing food. In Africa, one of the challenges we had during some of these wars is wheat, for example. But don't we produce wheat in Africa? We produce wheat in some countries in Africa. So if we developed that market, if we developed markets, so wheat markets, wheat is one of the commodities where we are spending of the 100 billion, we are spending 40% of the 100 billion on 4 commodities, on wheat, rice, maize, and soybean, right? If we developed the countries where we are doing well in wheat and we are very well connected, that money would be part of developing the African continent as meant for within the African continental trade area, right? If we developed our rice capability, how many countries do we have that have huge potential for rice production? Quite a number. But again, it goes back to the transport. If we develop that capacity, but also if we developed the trade regimes and ecosystem in line with African continental trade area, where we are complementing rather than competing in a way that doesn't advance trade, I think we could do more. So there's a lot we have to do. A lot of it is going to be in types of agreements we take on and how we implement them and how we stick with them. But a lot of it is also going to be in how we prioritize some of the inevitable developments we have to do. And one of those is infrastructure development. And low-cost infrastructure, not roads, rail. We need to invest in rail transport so that we can be able to move food around. But there's, just to conclude that, maybe not to leave that hanging, there's already thinking that is beginning to happen around corridor approaches that recognizes some of the biggest opportunities, the countries that offer the biggest opportunities for Africa to produce its food within Africa and connecting those good baskets of production to areas of deficit. So once we do that, we hopefully we can reduce some of that and start turning it into jobs on the African continent. The second question emergency response. I think it's a good idea, but before we create an emergency response, continental emergency response, we need to create a country level emergency response. At COVID, just to give you an example, at the time COVID started, and remember that supply chains were disrupted and we would have had challenges of finding food within 3 months or 2 months. There's no single country that we work in that had reserves of more than 3 months. So before you create emergency response for the continent, just think about the fact that we have to have national strategic reserves at country level that can service at least 6 months, you know. Anyway, that's the challenge. Are we done? Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you very much, the media, for this engagement. We do hope that as you reflect on Maputo, from Maputo, Abuja to Kampala, you as the media will also ask yourself the question, how can we